welcome to this Middle East series discussion sponsored by London Central Portfolio and Queen's on moving to and investing in the UK post-lockdown. Over the course of the next 60 minutes, we're going to look at key investment trends. We're going to look at tax and legal considerations, financing, immigration, logistics. So we've got a full hour ahead with a real expert panel. As always with PCD content, we love to hear from those watching, get the questions, comments, that you need answered by our expert panel. So if you drop those in the chat or in the Q&A, I will bring them on as we move through. Don't wait to the end. Get your question or comment right in the chat as we move through. To open up the conversation today, we're going to come to both of our sponsors, and I'd like to welcome Andrew Weir from London Central Portfolio and also Tom Wood from Queen's, just to introduce themselves and explain a little bit more about their business. So welcome, Andrew.
Hi, David. Thank you for introducing me. So I'm the Chief Exec of London Central Portfolio. We are a boutique-size private client real estate advisory business with the outlook of a family office. We're engaged in the art and science of acquiring and investing in prime central London property. Most of our clients are overseas. Many of them are in the Middle East, but all of them have very close links to London and are very interested in London. Our clients are generally high net worth delegators. They're people who are very successful within their own industry and value a similar level of expertise when it comes to London property. Either they don't have that knowledge or they don't have the time to acquire that knowledge, or simply it's sometimes just that they're not physically here in London. They require someone who has a local presence who can represent their interests within London. We have three main categories that our clients ask us to act for them on with respect to either their prime residence, their main home in London, or it can be for an investment property that they own in London. And that is search and acquisition, design and build, and then finally is lettings and property management. We're a team of 20, so all of those functions, all of those areas of expertise are performed internally.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. And Tom Wood from Queen's.
Yes, hi, thank you, David. So my name is Tom Wood. I'm head of operations at Queen's. We are a high-end specialist logistics company. We're based out of Fitzrovia in London, but we operate globally. And we focus on the movement of luxury goods, and that can be from anything as small as a piece of art on your wall, all the way to a large residency or a collection. And we aim to pack, ship and store your possessions seamlessly for high net worth individuals, both nationally and internationally. We've recently invested heavily into technology to ensure we can provide the highest level of service. And we also work slightly differently to others in the market, as we will appoint a move manager. So what this is it's someone who will take you through the process, guide you through it, and they really have the experience to ensure we can hit those levels of service throughout. We're a team of 15, as I say, based in Fitzrovia in London. So back to you, David. Thank you.
Perfect. So alongside Andrew and Tom, we've also got three expert panelists who I'm just going to introduce now. We've got Sunita Singh-Dalal of counsel with Stephenson Harwood in the Middle East in Dubai. Sunita, a regular on PCD content, delighted to have her back today. She leads the Middle East private wealth practice, where the team focuses on assisting clients in the Middle East, Africa, and Southwest Asia on cross-border private client, corporate, commercial, dispute resolution issues. Sunita has established intrinsic relationships with private banks, financial advisors, trustees, corporate service providers, and the local regulatory authorities. She actively works with local regulators to spread awareness in India and the GCC of the latest developments and updates within the private wealth sector, particularly in relation to new foundations and trust regimes implemented by ADGM, the IFC, and RAC ICC. So welcome, Sunita.
Thanks, David. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here from this part of the world.
Brilliant. Great to have you with us and get your perspective. We also have Yeung, who's a senior client advisor with Henley and Partners in London. Yeung specializes in residence and citizenship planning, and her role is to directly assist high and ultra high net worth private clients with global mobility and investment migration solutions. Yeung serves a global client base and can assist clients from all around the world from London. Welcome, Yat.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. And finally, we have Kaleggi, who's a private banker at Coutts in London. Monica is a regulated private banker in the Middle East, Asia and Africa market with international business at Coutts, specializing in tailored mortgages, investments and other solutions for high and ultra high net worth clients. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So we're going to get our conversation underway, looking at some of the legal aspects with Sunita. So Sunita, as you mentioned, you're based in Dubai. It'd be interesting to, first of all, just to hear a little bit about what demand and interest you see from high net worth clients in the region in London and the UK, and whether COVID has had any change or impact on these attitudes and demand that you've been seeing.
Thanks, David. I think COVID obviously has changed perspectives for many, but unlike others in this part of the world, actually it's seen very much as an opportunity. And then given the various tax incentives and tax holidays that have been levied by HMRC, that also enhances the opportunity as such. And what I mean by that is holidays in terms of stamp duty when acquiring residential property is certainly extremely attractive to certain clients. We also have the other spectrum of the client where actually that doesn't really come into the consideration in the overall scheme of things, given their vast wealth. But interestingly, what we've seen from this part of the world is an eagerness and definitely a lot of impatient potential customers coming across to people like Andrew and Tom and Monica, who are just waiting to be able to kind of break free and come out again and pick up acquisitions, whether those are property or prized value acquisitions. We've been looking at some press recently, which was very amusing to see that there were certain parts of Mayfair and Knightsbridge that were clearly suffering from the lack of footfall of draped ladies and men in white, as such, shall we say. So much so that apparently one set of young ladies from this part of the world, my understanding is, if I read this correctly, clubbed together and got their favorite ballerina shoe manufacturer from Chelsea or somewhere to come and set up shop here, because we, of course, here we've been open for business and haven't faced the restrictions that you unfortunately have had to face and deal with on a protracted basis. So it's I say that with tongue in cheek just to show that it's actually a two-way thing, and if the mountain can't move and so on, then Moses and Muhammad have to be a little more innovative about life. So it's quite COVID's taught us a lot. It's brought us all out of our comfort zone. It's also very interestingly, I've seen created a different perspective from clients looking to acquire properties. The traditional destinations, for example, amongst, and you could really club this together stereotypically, for example, you would have the Sindhi community residing in St. John's Wood and Swiss Cottage, and then you would have the North Indian lot who would choose somewhere a bit more hip and trendy and vibrant, such as Kensington and Knightsbridge and what have you, and so those kinds of cliques still exist, but with a slight difference, because I think clients from this part of the world, whether it's the Middle East, Southwest Asia or Africa, are no longer and never really have been investing in properties with a view to flipping them. So from an investment perspective, certainly what we do see is if homes are added to a portfolio within a family, they are intended to stay within that portfolio and serve generation to generation. Belgravia being a typical neighborhood where you find 3 or 4 generations congregating at any given point in time. And so things such as capital gains tax doesn't really impact the thought and decision-making process, because we are not purchasing with a view to making a gain. We are purchasing with a view to consolidating and enhancing our portfolio. So yes, the existing stamp duty type incentives are attractive for certain customers, and perhaps more so attractive, interestingly, again, to say, for example, some of the Indian families who have been waiting to come out and pick up small ticket properties, so therefore they can avail of such benefits, but those properties would probably be more often linked to perhaps the children now coming out to university. And so parents doing that, and that works very well, especially for Indians, because of course we have what we know as a limited remittance scheme. So every year, each member of a family is allowed to remit $250,000 outside of India, provided you meet certain criteria, and purchasing property for the family is definitely one. So if you had a family of 4 and all 4 pulled together, if Andrew, you were to do the math, I'm sure you're thinking already of potential opportunities that you could flag for such clients who'd be interested. And of course, with the academic year about to begin, and hopefully the kids being allowed to come into the UK now to study as opposed to doing it all remotely, certainly there'll be a change. And I think people are now understanding the importance of having something of your own, which is also therefore safe and secure for the child in unforeseen, unprecedented events such as COVID, where children were actually, if I'm not mistaken, asked to, pack up and leave hostels for obvious reasons because of the pandemic. And I think also the other thing we're seeing is the clients who have already got the pied-à-terres in town, they're kind of weekend party homes, but at the same time, they're now looking to expand further afield and probably look into something a little more quiet, a little more charming out in the country, and perhaps look further afield. And I think that will be another trend that we'll see that will continue.
Thank you. A question from Waleed Alami for you here, Sunita, just asking, can you talk a little bit about inheritance tax mitigation strategies for multiple UK property ownership? So
I could, but you'd all probably pass out or kill yourselves by the end of it. So a quick way to get to inheritance tax. Inheritance tax is leviable. It's levied at the rate of 40%. And it is inevitable. In terms of mitigating inheritance tax, yes, we certainly do provide solutions, and not necessarily convoluted ones, for mitigating the liability that's left at the end of the day. What we do try to do is have clients ensure that they're actually leaving their children with something that does not become a noose or a big taxable liability around the neck. It defeats the entire object. And they probably would just want to set light to the damn property because it's causing them more of a liability than a joy. You can mitigate inheritance tax depending on how the property has been owned. You can mitigate inheritance tax depending on how much has been gifted to members of the family. A gift in the UK, if made, to anybody at arm's length, if it has been gifted and the person who has made the gift has not passed away within the next 7 years, and that gift remains free of inheritance tax. And I won't bore you any further with other details because that would just turn into a horrible, boring lecture. But no, what I did want to say very quickly is, although I am based here in the Middle East, of course, we work seamlessly, headquartered historically in London. So these are things that we often work as together collectively as a team. So I could probably look at a client who's based here wanting to expand into London. So we would obviously pick up the phone to people like Andrew and then ask Tom to help with logistics, Monica to help with on the ground kind of banking requirements that they have. And then we would look to our other teams in Paris for the Monaco aspects or for the Riviera aspects and so on. So it works very well from a client's perspective. You don't necessarily have to run from pillar to post to get conflicting advice. And I think today's session also demonstrates that if you put the right core team together, a client doesn't necessarily have to have a nightmare experience when wanting to acquire a wonderful pad in Park Lane.
Terrific, thank you. Well, Walid, hope that got to your question. Do keep questions flowing, and we will bring them to panelists as we come through. Sunita, just sticking with you, if clients are looking at actually a relocation to become a resident in the UK, again, it's a huge topic, but what are the kind of key things that they need to think about before becoming UK tax resident?
Sure, it is a huge topic, and it's quite critical. And first and foremost is you cannot but engage with your professional advisors, with people like us soon enough. So don't wait until you've found something, because then we're working backwards to try and meet a deadline that perhaps Andrew has no control over, because he's then facing pressure from the other side as such. So engage with us sooner rather than later, because there is a significant amount of beneficial work that can be done that will benefit you in the long term if you've taken the correct pre-arrival tax planning exercise. And that would typically involve reviewing existing structures, where those structures are, where the assets are, and where family members are. It would involve ensuring we have been able to create what we call a clean capital corpus, which means that if the family do need to draw upon that clean capital whilst they're in the UK, such drawings could be tax-free, provided they haven't been tainted or funds haven't been mixed up. So a whole segregation process is very, very necessary. And of course, to do that, one has to analyze it before to ensure that assets and pots of wealth have been segregated correctly. The other thing that people often forget, and I think COVID has really been a wake-up call for certain families, is getting caught in certain jurisdictions perhaps longer than anticipated, or working in different jurisdictions where the impact of your involvement in certain corporate structures may impact where the control and management is then deemed to be given from. And that again is a whole myriad of exposes you to a whole myriad of complex issues in terms of taxation. And so if you haven't actually received the requisite advice and you're absolutely not crystal clear on what you can be doing, you may inadvertently open up your offshore wealth to HMRC too, because you are in effect controlling and managing it from the shores of the UK. So there are quite a few measures that can be done: directorships, trusteeships, corporate and management roles should also be looked at, and ring fencing and preserving wealth as much as possible in advance. It doesn't take forever, but it's certainly something that should not be avoided.
Okay, thank you. And prime London property is just one luxury asset that clients like to own that's aspirational in nature. I mean, what kind of trends are you seeing for wealthy families in other areas of luxury like art or other asset classes you're seeing? Are you seeing any developments there from clients you're dealing with?
There are some real clear trends coming through, David, and it's quite reflective, I think, of a transition of wealth and a transition of governance. And by that, I mean, in terms of the traditional founders, patriarchs and matriarchs of the families would always prefer to invest in real estate assets, without a doubt. And if they haven't got a foot in a particular jurisdiction, for example, as London, then the first on the list would always be a real estate asset. You're then looking at the next gen diversifying, yes, into slightly more creative classes of assets, such as art. Again, during the pandemic, there has been a lot of movement in the art world, and art not necessarily remains as illiquid as people feel it is. The buying and selling of art to trigger and release pools of cash has actually been something that we've seen firsthand. But interestingly, I'm finding that also the next gen are looking even further in terms of ethical investments, impact investing, and even to the extent of incubating startups and putting together investor clubs. There are a lot of there are a lot of corporate regimes available here within the GCC themselves that are conducive because they have a slightly lighter touch in terms of regulation. But actually what they're doing is they're encouraging the entrepreneurial group to come along in their peer group. Everyone pulls in, say, a small amount of $5 million each, and off they go. And the kinds of companies that they're then choosing to incubate or to bring to market and how it's being done is phenomenal. So you've gone from everything from logistics to FMCG type goods, aquaculture, aquaponics, all the kinds of things that make our environment here in the Middle East a little more self-sustainable. That's something without a doubt that is just, twofold. And then of course, between that kind of real entrepreneurial set and the real estate at the top in between, you're seeing a lot of the next gen looking into research and development type platforms to take them one step further. And clients of mine have even gone a step further and are actually putting together incubation funds with R&D teams at university level. So the kids are putting together their bright minds and creating something, and then these people are ready to fund it and take it to the next level and handhold them and bring them out. So there have been some phenomenal changes going on. I don't think there's anything such a for sure.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Sunita. If you have any questions for Sunita, please put them in the chat and we'll bring her back on to answer them. But I'm going to move on to Yap from Henley and Partners now, just to talk on some of the immigration aspects. Hi there, Yap.
Hello.
So we were talking there with Sunita just on some of the legal issues about moving to the UK, but immigration is a completely separate topic that clients need to consider. And many high net worth clients in the Middle East own property, spend summers in London. But if they want to spend more than a few months a year, how might they achieve that with the UK Investor Visa Programme, for example?
Yeah, so for the UK, there are a number of visa categories in which an international investor who doesn't already have the right to reside in the UK that can consider. The most popular one amongst sort of high net worth, ultra high net worth clients is definitely the investor visa. So the investor visa itself, it's at a 2 million, 5 million, 10 million investment. And the investment needs to be in UK registered and UK actively trading companies. And it can be in the form of corporate bonds or equities. So usually how that investment is made is via an investment account at an FCA regulated financial institution, so such as Coutts, for example. And then with that investment and also, of course, with a number of other personal documents and so on, then an application can be submitted to the UK Home Office to apply for residence. So our Henley and Partners, we focus on investment immigration or obtaining citizenship or residence for our clients. And a lot of our clients, I would say, that are interested in the UK, many of them already have properties. Many of them are considering moving to the UK. The reason for them doing so often it's lifestyle, education of children, and a lot of people want to own a home in the UK. So if an investor, international investor, they have a property in the UK or they plan to get a property in the UK, they can visit the property as a visitor. But in the sort of from an immigration perspective, there is a clear difference from whether you are just a visitor, like a tourist, and then you get to spend a few months each year in your home, or you become a resident, like a legal resident, which is in the case of if you apply for a visa category such as the investor visa. Some clients would say that I'm not happy just being a resident, a legal person residing in the UK, but I also want to become a permanent resident, which means that in the future, no matter what happens, I should be able to return to the UK as I'm a permanent resident, or that I have indefinitely to remain. Whereas some clients would say that I actually want to become a citizen. So no matter what it is, for us, the conversation is very often sort of speaking with the client, trying to understand the objectives, because there are different requirements, which I won't go into in details at all. But it is important to sort of understand what the client's wish are. And often they are sort of considering that not just for themselves, but also for the family, and then what their plans. And it's also often part of the bigger picture of sort of wealth planning, family planning, succession planning, and so forth.
And how do people tend to decide between, if they're doing an investor visa, between the 2, 5 and 10 million? What's the sort of considerations there for those different options?
Yeah, I think the main difference is time. So with the 2 million investment, the minimum time that person needs to sort of stay in the UK is 5 years. So if you invest 2 million after a minimum of 5 years of residing in the UK, each year you stay in the UK for 6 months on average, then you can apply for indefinite to remain. With 5 million, it's 3 years. With 10 million or a higher amount, the minimum time becomes 2 years. So this is particularly relevant for those clients who are active internationally, who have business in different parts of the world, and then maybe the time that they can be sure of spending in the UK physically, it might not be as flexible. That's why some of them might consider investing a larger amount, such as 5 million or 10 million instead of the 2 million, in order to be eligible to apply for indefinite to remain. So other key considerations, I would say, for the investor visa, for those who are interested, is to consider the source of funds and source of wealth, because that's a very important criteria. That's also a conversation that they would need to have, clients need to have with FCA regulated financial institution to make sure that everything is good. But it's also that I think it's ultimately really is whether the client is able to plan themselves to spend those time physically in the UK, because ultimately, if someone just wants to have a home in the UK, and if they just want to spend the summer in the UK, they can do so by being a visitor and coming here. But I think the pandemic and a lot of things have also made a lot of people realize that maybe it's not as mobile and fluid as people would think that is.
Okay, and how does the UK investor visa scheme compare with other jurisdictions, do you find, if people are looking at a range of options?
Yeah, so what we do is that because we assist clients from all around the world for country programs or target jurisdictions from all around the world, so we're able to compare across programs. And I would say that a lot of clients are interested in the UK. If many of them are sort of families based in the Middle East, Indian families and so on, some of them, they already have a very set idea that UK is the place that they want to go to. Or maybe it's a family in the Middle East that says, like, because of the lifestyle, London is the place. Therefore, some of them may not even consider others. However, because of the sort of criteria and also because of the investment requirements and so on, I would say that a lot of clients who are interested in the UK, at the same time, they might also consider Canada, Australia, US, and Singapore. Like, these are the sort of English-speaking countries where there is a good education system. Clients think about the healthcare, thinks about lifestyle, and so on. Comparing UK with Canada, Australia, US, and Singapore, speaking about the investor visa type categories, the processing time for the UK is a lot faster. So for Australia, for example, depending on your nationality, a lot of our Asian clients, for example, they end up waiting for a year or 2 years for approval, and the time is a lot faster for the UK. We're a lot more efficient here. The investment categories, eligible investments are relatively attainable, and the guideline is very clear. There is no, unlike the US, where your investment is sort of fixed for a certain period of time. That is not like that in the UK. So a lot of the clients would be interested in the UK. However, real estate investment itself is not an eligible investment. So that's something that we will also make very clear, that the 2 million, 5 million, 10 million cannot be in real estate. But I would say that most of the clients, they know that, and they're happy with that. They were happy to invest 2, 5, 10 million into corporate bonds and equities. And then I would say almost every one of them still would definitely have an entire portfolio of real estate investment, and which is the part that London Central Portfolio and also Queen's would come in for creating that home or multiple homes and multiple investments in the UK.
Terrific, thank you. Well, we're going to come on to the investor visa management with Monica later, but now I want to just come to Andrew Weir for just a bit more of a detailed chat about the trends and drivers from the London property market. Welcome back, Andrew.
Hi there.
Sunita was mentioning certain nationalities having preferences around the London market in quite a detailed way. Is this something you've observed with the tastes of buyers, or do you think it's more diverse than that, as it were? The international buyers you see, do they have knowledge and preferences already of areas of London, and how do you kind of fit in with that?
Well, I mean, I agree and disagree. I mean, I agree insofar as birds of a feather do tend to stick together. So you do get geographic pockets of London, villages of London, where you do tend to get very similar nationalities congregating. I think that's a very natural thing that happens in any city in the world. But I think London is so various, it's more nuanced than that, and it's more mixed than that. And I think that with everything that COVID's produced, it's sort of got a bit more mixed up. I think that primarily people want to be where their friends are or where their family are. And then beyond that, it's the sort of key attractions of London, the sort of enduring qualities, and it's how they fit into that. It's sort of business, education, leisure, and it's that those are the sort of the drivers that determine where they want to be, really.
Great. And we mentioned at the top, as lockdown eases, I think a lot of people are expecting, with travellers, international travellers returning, we're going to see, what do you expect for the market dynamics and how investors should view that for, for prime central London and surrounds?
Well, it's certainly very nuanced, as I say, and there's a variety of reasons for that, not just COVID. It's recent histories, Brexit since 2016 onwards, that has affected the market here, and obviously the stamp duty increases, and now the stamp duty holiday, which is just most of it which has just ended. That's created anomalies in the market, so it is quite subtle and nuanced. It doesn't perform necessarily in a very uniform manner. It's got funny little pockets of activity or lack of activity within it, but the essentially the sorry, I've forgotten your question now.
I was saying, just how should investors navigate this tricky market once we start opening up? What's the value of advice around the market?
So I think the misconception that some people have is that London is very quiet and that they can pick up a bargain. That is the sort of thing to be cautious of. Now, simplistically, outer London has been very busy. Certainly the regions beyond London have been very busy. The prime central bits of London have been quieter. And whilst that would indicate that you might be able to pick up a sort of a price reduction and a good deal, it's not as simple as that, because the nature of property ownership within that area is such that people, if prices soften, they actually reverse, they take their properties off the market. They certainly don't put them on the market. And one of the biggest issues we have at the moment is lack of stock in those prime London areas, because people are very nervous about publicly advertising a property when they're fully aware that a significant part of the typical audience is absent because of travel restrictions. So this is really where we come into play. This is where a buying agent really comes into play at the moment, is you really need somebody who can look beyond just what's being publicly advertised and access things which are not necessarily readily available to the person in the street. So it's quite it's a reasonably busy market, but it's a difficult market to read for obvious reasons.
Okay, thanks. And from an investment perspective, what's your view on London still adding up for foreign investors in terms of just looking at the cold hard returns?
Well, it's certainly, from all of the clients that we talk to, either in the Middle East or the Far East, there does seem to be sort of literally a bit of a queue of sort of capital in the wings, waiting until they can get here. Most people want to physically get here. I think the attraction of London has always been, it's very much a long-term play for central London. It's never produced the best yields. The great thing about prime central London has been capital appreciation, and that is as relevant and as present now as it ever has been. From the EU referendum of 2016 onwards, I would describe it was a bit like the market in London getting a slow puncture. The air sort of slowly been coming out of it, all the way up to the general election, where Boris got a much bigger majority than anyone was expecting in December 19. And prices have softened all the way up to that point, and then we've had the pandemic to cope with. So prices are competitive. And all of the big research houses are predicting between now and 2024 a sort of 24-25% growth, capital growth in that period. So I think it's a good time to enter the market. Rental prices softened obviously during our various lockdowns, but we've noticed now with the portfolio of properties that we manage that the reduction in rents has not totally recovered to pre-pandemic levels, but it's the discounts are much smaller now, and we've had a big influx of people preparing for the return to office life and preparing for student life, academic life to return in August and September. So things are renting again. We're very busy from a rental perspective, and there are some good opportunities. So I think it all still adds up.
Do you think as well there'll be new opportunities as commercial property is perhaps converted to residential? There's new styles of residential property where I think people are looking at city centres and saying, actually, we should have a better mix of residential and commercial, perhaps in one place, akin to Hong Kong or other cities where you don't have such a distinction between the city centre commercial property and suburbs. What's your view on new ideas that will come into the market?
Yeah, well, London has got form on this, I think, good positive form on this, sort of reinventing itself. You only have to look back relatively recently to places like Canary Wharf, which were only sort of 15 years ago, were just warehouses, low-rise warehouses all the way down West Ferry Road. That's now a high-rise combination of state-of-the-art office space and state-of-the-art residential properties. You look at areas like Shoreditch and Clerkenwell, which were 10, 20 years ago were sort of not the most attractive, salubrious spots of London. They weren't literally no-go zones, but they weren't places people really wanted to live. And they're now the absolute height of urban fashion of places people want to live. So I think, there's all sorts of examples in London of post offices, pubs, telephone exchanges, television centres. There's an endless list of commercial, industrial buildings that have been converted into residential property, residential space, and they are very, very appealing and very attractive, and they create new neighbourhoods in the process. You only have to look at King's Cross is another well-known one. So I think London, the silver lining in the pandemic could be that it is a much sort of overdue London sort of needs now to sort of reinvent itself, and that's going to be very exciting, I think.
And Sunita mentioned that London property, a trophy property, can be something that's held and passed down as part of a wealth preservation, wealth planning strategy. Do you see foreign investors coming to buy certain assets that they think will be a long-term store of value, something for the family to use into the future? Sorry, Andrew, did you catch that question?
Sorry, I thought you were asking that for Sunita. Yes, no. Definitely. People, just as Sunita said, most of our clients hold their assets for generations. We've got many clients that have bought their property from us 20, 30 years ago and really have no interest in selling it. So they're very much, they like combination of sort of blue chip areas where they're very comfortable. They've their own family for generations have known that area, but they're also interested in sort of new areas that are going to be regenerated. So it's a combination of the two, really.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you for that, Andrew. If you have any questions for Andrew or Yat or Sunita, you pop them in the chat and I'll bring them back on. Moving now to Tom Wood. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
So for those deciding to move to the UK, we've heard a little bit about the tax and legal side, the immigration, the actual acquisition of a property. What are some of the logistical issues these families, high net worth families, have with a wide variety of possessions and complex things that need very great care and attention? What's your view there?
I think there's three main points that we like to take into consideration when we're doing this. And the first is, what is your timeline? Secondly, what are the age and the value of your items you're looking to transport? And thirdly, how do you divide up your possessions? So if I start with, what is your timeline? I mean, when we're looking to move a resident from A to B, from one country to another, there are two solutions you can use in form of shipping, and this is air freight and sea freight. Air freight is quite simply the more direct version, and it is on an aeroplane. But when you're looking to move high volume, like a residence is, sea freight is the more appropriate option. It takes a little bit longer. So you're looking from Dubai port to a UK port, you're looking at about 30 to 35 days for the sale. But it is a far more cost-effective option, and there is a lot less impact on the environment. So that's sort of the first point I'd like to get across is the timeline basis. Secondly, what are the age and the value of your items you're looking to transport? Now, the clients that we deal with on a daily basis, they're lucky enough to own incredible items, however small or large they are. But a lot of these are all different mediums, different materials. So we we have to focus on this to apply for certain export licenses and permits to move these items globally. For example, something that may be as simple as a wooden chest within a property, this might be a particular species of wood, and therefore you have to go for something called a CITES permit. Again, another example is an artist that you may all know called Damien Hirst. He tends to work with a lot of preserved animals and butterflies. A recent shipment we did from the UK to the US, we had to define each part of the butterfly's wings, and all of them had to have different permits. So it does show quite how complex it can be. And as a rule of thumb, it's usually anything over the age of 50 years is something where it's likely going to need a permit.
Okay, thanks. And do you arrange, I suppose, does this require specific insurance as well? I imagine the moving around of these items requires arrangement of specialist insurance. Is that part of something that you do?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So we work closely with a broker based in London, and an insurance firm, and we use insurance quite often with our clients. Okay,
and just to give us a sense of the sort of type of client you might work on, perhaps give us a run through of the clients making a move. What's the overall, what's the steps in your chain to make that move a success? I think it starts off with what we call an on-site survey, and in layman's terms, that is when someone like myself and one of our specialist handlers will attend the property, and we'll look at the floor levels, the access, the weight of the items. I mean, if you're using a London property, for example, it's quite common, or a London townhouse, it's quite common to have 2 or 3 steps leading up to the property. Now, in our daily life, that can cause huge stress and the things that we have to do to get through that. So we get specialist equipment in. I mean, recently, a specialist handler of ours was installing a mammoth skeleton in someone's house. So you can see that, with that, we have to get cranes involved, and it's just a very intricate and complex process. So when we do these surveys at the beginning, they really are very important. We also tend to do on these surveys, it's not always that the residents are moving to one property, they might be moving to multiple. So we do a color coding system, because it may sound simple, but you're moving a client's current home from one to their new home. So you want everything to be exact and perfect and as it was. We then bring in the move managers that I mentioned earlier on. So they will organize the schedule that suits your requirements. We do the packing and the wrapping with our specialist technicians, transport it to our storage facility. And here we have a cloud-based inventory management system that can be accessed digitally by our clients. So if you're wanting to split it, and you can, as I say, you can access that digitally on a daily basis. We then get to the shipping process, where we'll move the items abroad via air or via sea. And then we get to the final hurdle, which is the installation and the white glove service. So it's quite regular that your more standard removal companies won't actually do the installation, but this is something that we really focus on. And we want it to be as if the clients always live there. So everything is taken out and placed as it was prior. And do you work with partners on the ground in different regions? Do you travel out? Does the team travel out, or how does it work? Do you kind of just have opposite numbers in other locations who work to the same standards as you? Yeah, exactly. I mean, over the years, we've developed partnerships with similar firms like ourselves, but it's also quite common for particular clients of ours who like working with our team, and they're very happy to fly them internationally to move items, because it's very personal, and I think it's very important to them that the experience is there and that they're happy. If they like someone, they will move them internationally to ensure that it's done correctly. And that personal touch, it sounds so specialist that's a real differentiator for you versus other providers, would be, the level of care and detail and precision, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's something that we get asked quite regularly, and I think it's understandable for clients to look for comparisons in this area. And I'd probably say that across the board of the panelists here. But the thing that we have is a level of expertise, whether that's within our office, on the ground with our technicians, or in our storage facility, where we have, again, another group of specialist handlers. We have so much experience. And again, it's such a personal move, this, and it's just very important. Some of these don't have any monetary value, but they have huge sentimental value.
So I think with both of those involved, it's just very key to have the experience behind it all. And we tend to sort of move these residences like it's an art exhibition installation. You know, we're trying to do the install at the very same level, just to provide that white glove service.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you for that, Tom. I'm just going to come now to Monica to pick up on some of the things on the financing and the wealth management side. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you.
We actually had a question which I'm going to open up with from Yasmina Cree around the investor visa, and it just asks, once the portfolio of £2 to £10 million has been invested, at what point can you liquidate after the qualifying period? So you have your investment portfolio, and then what do you find is the next step, or at what point, following Yasmina's question?
I mean, if a client wants to liquidate their portfolio, we would work closely with their immigration advisors. So, you know, for example, if you invest that 5 million and the indefinite leave to remain is after 3 years, we would work closely with that immigration advisor to at least make sure they've got the indefinite leave to remain first. We need to make sure they have that in place before we can liquidate the portfolio. So that would be the standard procedure if a client wants to do that.
Okay, well, Yasmin, I hope that's clear.
To answer that question.
Once the box is ticked, as it were, the client's free to vary those investments away. But it will be interesting just to hear more generally about how you at Coutts you work with immigration advisors around the management of assets, and what are the things that you have to really deliver to make sure those visa applications are successful.
Yeah, so I mean, for individuals on the UK Investor Visa Programme, as Yatwan was explaining, we offer a discretionary portfolio service, which is basically in line with the Home Office rules. So we will structure that portfolio and invest in qualifying assets, which are basically managed by our in-house team of investment analysts and portfolio managers. So what we do at Coutts is we do primarily invest in funds and shares in the UK that feature in the FTSE 100. And that's mainly because we feel that that's the most appropriate strategy to achieve a sort of desired level of diversification. So adding on to what Yatwan said, the investment amounts are 2, 5 and 10 million. And of course, depending on that amount and after the required time has elapsed, that's when you'll qualify for indefinite leave to remain, which of course the client would work with their immigration advisor to sort that part out. And then, as I said, if a client, of course, wants to liquidate their portfolio, they can do that afterwards. So what we would basically do is just provide clients and their immigration advisors with regular reporting and just work with them to provide all the documentation that the UK Home Office require for the duration of that, for their visa. So that's how we would sort of support clients when it comes to that particular UK Investor Visa Programme.
And I guess people arriving in the UK, it's very helpful to also be able to do some of the day-to-day banking as well as the portfolio management side. I guess having that all under the roof, if you're moving country, not to be able to have regular banking.
Absolutely, It's not just, that's all we'll offer you. There's a relationship behind that as well. So if a client does need banking solutions here in the UK, that's something that Coutts would be able to offer. Various things that we can offer, from your credit cards, your mortgages, day-to-day banking, other investment solutions. So we wouldn't just focus on, let's say, the UK Investor Visa Programme. If a client wants to do more with us, absolutely, we're more than happy to support them in any way possible.
Okay, perfect. Just looking at the property financing, historic lows. I read about the kind of financing deals that are available to high net worth clients. How would you help a client in the Middle East if they're looking at a property, financing property?
Well, I mean, we offer a range of different lending solutions to clients. So whether they're looking for perhaps main residence here, maybe they're moving back to the UK, or they want a second home, or just a base in England, maybe London, or even an investment property. So the approach we take is very customized, flexible, and unique for that particular client. So we can make sure that we understand their personal circumstances, their financial position, and just their multi-jurisdictional status to see what would be the best approach for them. So we really do look at it on an individual basis and fully try and understand what that client needs, and then offer a lending solution based on that, really.
Okay, thanks. And obviously many high net worth clients moving to the UK aren't moving to be employed. So in terms of UK mortgages, how do you help them to achieve that?
Yeah, well, I think, with a lot of the clients that we deal with, they are generally not employed. These are high net worth, ultra high net worth clients who are not necessarily planning on becoming employed when they move to the UK. So a way that we will support these types of clients is by just reviewing their asset base. So whether that's offshore, it could be in a different currency. We will essentially look at their assets and monetize that to service the mortgage. So I think, the conventional way to service a mortgage in the UK is by just looking at standard income sources, whether that's from your payslip, your tax returns. But what we do as a private bank is really take that individual approach and can look beyond that. We can look at their assets, whether that's in the Middle East, and use that as a way to support the mortgage. And to give you an example, so I did recently help a client who, because of COVID, his circumstances changed and was now working from home on a full-time basis, planning to move back. And we were able to use his assets to support that process, and just via Zoom. So clients don't have to be in the country as well for us to help them with their move to the UK.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks very much, Monica. Tom, we've got a question for you in the Q&A. It's just no name attached, from an anonymous attendee, just asking, could you tell us a little bit more about your storage facility in London? Is there a bonded storage facility?
Yes, it is. So what that means is a bonded storage facility is an HMRC warehouse, which means if you're looking to limit your tax exposure on entrance and clearance into the UK, we can separate the residencies. So, for example, if you had an art collection that was coming with your residence, we could split that up and we could bring that into our storage facility and therefore limit your tax exposure, and you wouldn't be due the 5% import tax that you would on others, with the exception of the TOR, for example, which is the transfer of residency. But it just means it's a really good way to bring items into the UK without paying the initial import VAT. When the items do leave our facility, that's when the import's due, but it can be for a number of years and there's no limit on it.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I hope that answers your question. Still time to ask a quick question. We're just coming to the end of our session. I'm just going to come to each of the panelists really for the key tips from their area when they've got clients either thinking about investing or moving to the UK. Perhaps we'll come back to Sunita first of all to say, Sunita, what's your key tip or any key takeaways from what we've heard this morning?
I think the biggest takeaway, hopefully everyone who's been listening has learned, is please engage with professional advisors to cover all the points, not just the property acquisition and not just the logistics of the move, because clearly Andrew and Tom are well placed to help with that. But first and foremost, to work backwards and understand who's moving, where they're moving, what the impacts of that move may be. How are you acquiring the property, and what are you going to be using the property for your own use, or is it going to be commercial or mixed or rented, and just to have some clarity in terms of options and implications of those options, and also most importantly, I think COVID has taught us to ensure that we have built a degree of flexibility into the overall plan. So that if and when we need to exit, or if and when we need to liquidate assets, we aren't stuck in a corner with no get out of jail kind of pass as such. So I think engaging and understanding is important, but also the implications of what the steps are just before you've taken them will make for a much better informed decision.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Sunita. I'm going to come to Yat in a second, but we've actually got a question in the Q&A just for Monica that I'll just ask quickly. Monica, you mentioned about lending against property, but are you able to lend against investments? And what if those investments are outside of the UK? So lending on foreign assets. Monica, what's the position?
Yeah, so we do actually offer a sort of a solution which is investment-backed lending. So basically what we would do, we would lend against a portfolio investment. That investment does need to be with Coutts, though. It would need to be with us. So when it comes to sort of lending against an investment that is held off, the best way to sort of try and get that sorted for you by bringing that over to Coutts and being able to lend against it. So yeah, absolutely, that's something that we do offer, and it's very, very popular with a lot of our clients.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks for that. Maybe you want to follow up on with that question. Another question in the Q&A here for Tom, actually, just asking how much is the tax for art imported from EU countries, and is there tax to be paid when people move their already used furniture and belongings to the UK from any country following Brexit? I appreciate, Tom, you're not a tax advisor, but on a very practical level, how do you see these things playing out? Maybe we'll come to Sunita although not a VAT expert, we'll come for a quick comment in a second. But Tom, first of all.
Yeah, sure. I mean, simply going back to that, anything of art that enters the UK from any country, whether it's EU or another continent, it's always 5% import VAT. The way that you cannot do that is, as I say, use a bonded facility like ours, where we cannot pay the tax up front. Moving on to the furniture and belongings, that is a little bit more of a long-winded one. And as you correctly said, David, I'm not a tax expert. However, it does depend on the circumstance. So, for example, if you were moving from the EU to the UK, and it was for the first time, and you were moving residences, yes, in some areas, you can apply for a transfer of residency through HMRC, and you can avoid in areas not paying the import VAT. But we actually did a Q&A recently for some clients of ours on Brexit. So if that person would like to share their details with me, I'm very happy to share the portfolio we've put together for that.
Terrific. Well, yeah, Sunita, we're not holding you out as a VAT expert here, but do you see clients getting caught out, particularly very high value assets like yachts, and there's all sorts of traps there on importation taxes?
No, absolutely, and that's why, coming back to what I said, is engage with us first before you've actually set sail. No pun intended. I'll be on a boat on Friday, actually. But make sure you've engaged beforehand and just weighed up all the options. It would be awful to have just gone into this eyes shut in oblivion to be fined that you're slapped with a huge tax consequence. Terrible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just coming back to resume our closing comments as we wrap up this hour. What are the kind of key things that people should take away from the session from your side?
I think the key word to consider is domicile diversification. So maybe it is to gain residence in the UK via investor visa, innovator visa, so red visa. Maybe for particular client circumstances, it is to actually get a European residence in Portugal, Malta, Montenegro. So I mean, it really depends. So I think for clients who are interested in making London their home, of course, consider UK residents, but also just come and talk to us and have a conversation and figure out what is the best thing that suits your family and your objective from both lifestyle and health and education perspective.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, Andrew, from your side, what are the key messages from today's session?
I think to be aware that when travel restrictions lift, I suspect there is going to be quite a lot of people arriving at the same time. So planning ahead of schedule, getting in touch with someone who can act on your behalf remotely whilst you're not necessarily here yourself. Be aware that selling agents, estate agents, having been one myself for much of my life, they are in the business of selling the stock they have. They're not acting on your behalf, and they will sell you whatever they have. It can be helpful to have someone acting on strictly for your interests and finding you the property that's right for you, specifically that's right for you. And also being aware that property in London is a constrained resource. That's one of the reasons why it appreciates so well, is that it is very difficult to build more houses in the prime bits of central London. So that is always an attraction, but it is also sort of a word of caution, is there's never that much available at any one time. So plan ahead and get some representation.
Thank you. Monica, I'm going to come to you for your top tip, but you're very popular today because you've got another question in the Q&A. It's just asking about a question for Monica. You mentioned banking associated with portfolios. Can you get this up and running for a client before they become UK resident, or do you have to be resident before you can set up some banking? What's the answer to that for those moving to the UK?
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, in terms of the type of clients I deal with, specifically clients who are non-UK resident, or they are UK resident who are UK. So you don't have to be UK resident to set up day-to-day banking with Coutts. And I think that's what's great about our bank, you know, having that sort of facility to be able to cater to international clients who don't actually live here yet. So absolutely, that's something we can help with.
Perfect.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so and what's your top tip from the session as we wrap up today?
My top tip, I definitely would add on to what Sunita said about engaging with the right advisors to help you in the process of moving to the UK. And in terms of, from my perspective, just having the fact that we have a tailored approach to understanding your personal circumstances, your financial position, your overall international status, and just put the trust in us and know that we have your best interest at heart, and, you know, we want to help you with the move. So I think trusting the right advisors, and then, you know, with Coutts as well, we don't advertise, we build our business by word of mouth. So for us, we really just want to make sure that we can support our clients with exactly what they need and offer them the right solutions.
Thank you. And Tom, our final closing comment as we wrap up the session today, any key takeaways from Queen's?
Yeah, I think the other panelists have summed it up well. A lot has changed with London recently in the past 12 and 24 months with both Brexit and the pandemic. And I think the main point is take advice from the experts. It's a very personal and complex industries that we all deal with, and I think it has to be done correctly.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you to the panel today. Thank you to London Central Portfolio and Queen's for sponsoring this session. Contact details will follow of all the panelists so that you can take up specific questions further. Thanks for the very active Q&A and participation in the session, and I wish